All right, today we're talking about EQ principles that are really handy to know because they can make your EQ moves sound more musical. None of these are hard, fast rules, but if you're going to be making cuts and boosts anyway, it's really helpful to know about these things because they can make your cuts and boosts sound more melodic, more tonal, and just more pleasing to the ear in general. And more importantly, they can encourage harmonious resonance and discourage dissonance. So let's dive in and take a look. So first things first, when you're mixing, it's really helpful to keep charts handy that will tell you which frequencies are aligned with which notes. And these are quick, easy Google searches. You could just find charts that you like, bookmark that tab, and always have that ready to go. But this way, it's really easy to see that E5 is at 659 hertz and so on. Really useful stuff to just keep around. And EQ tip number 1 is about using musical bandwidths. Now, in general, when we're EQing, we cut narrow and we boost wide, but if we're already doing that, we might as well keep in mind what a musical bandwidth is and go ahead and use that knowledge to set our EQ values. So let's take a look. For this tutorial, we're going to be working on the lead vocal in this little tune in the key of C. So if we're going to give this vocalist a boost at 2.5K, then we might as well consider a musical Q factor. We might as well boost at 1 octave or in intervals of an octave instead of just a random number, and that will give the overall tonality more of a melodic feel. So instead of just using a Q factor of 1 or 1.5, which might sound fine, we're going to use a Q factor of 1.4. So how this works is 1 octave is equal to a Q factor of 1.4, and then you double that or half it depending on if you want a half octave or 2 octaves. So a 2 octave Q value is about 0.7, and a half octave Q value is about 2.8, and so on. So we're going to do this boost at exactly 1.4, so we're doing exactly a 1 octave boost at the 2.5K range. Yeah, very nice. And that's just something you can keep in mind. When you're setting your Q values and you get them right about to where it sounds good, you might just consider adjusting it to match your octaves or a half octave, quarter octave, so on. And we did this boost at 2.5, which is the clarity range of the vocal to enhance that, but that brings us to tip number 2, boosting in key. So if we're going to boost the vocal in the 2.5K range, but we're in the key of C, it will actually sound more musical if we give the boost at 2.1K instead of 2.5. So you can see here that C7 is at 2093, so just below 2.1K. 2.5 will sound good, but that's right in between E flat and E. So it'll just be more musical in terms of the frequencies and the overtones that we're encouraging if we do our boost in key. And like I said, this is not a hard, fast rule, but if you've never tried this, you should give it a try because the end result is actually really cool. So let's listen again to the boost at 2.5, and then we'll compare it to the boost at 2.1. And at 2.1. Yeah, it's a subtle technique, but what we're doing is encouraging the harmonic overtones in key instead of out of key. And we did it using our tip 1, which was setting our Q factor at 1.4. So a 1 octave boost. And that sounded nice. It's bringing clarity to the vocal. We also are probably going to want to dip out the low mids, which directly mask that high mid frequency. And that's really common with vocals because cutting the low mids will naturally make the high mids more clear. And that brings us to tip number 3, which is EQ cuts at dissonant frequencies. So if we're boosting at a tonal place, in line with the key of C, it's equally musical to do EQ cuts in dissonant frequencies. So in this case, since the muddiness that we want to take out is somewhere around the 250, 300 hertz range, instead of dipping out at 250 or 300, we could adjust that to 233 hertz, which is B flat. And if this vocal sounded better with an even lower cut around 200, G sharp A flat is at 207 hertz, which is very dissonant against C major. So those are options for us. Now C4 falls right at 261 hertz. So if we can do our low-mid cut centered around frequencies that are on either side of 261, that might be a good thing. In fact, if it needed something higher, we might go all the way up to, say, 311, which is E flat. Let's try that. Let's try 311 and see how that sounds. So we're going to cut more narrow than we boosted. We are going to cut it half an octave, which is a Q value of 2.8, and we're going to take out 3 dB at 311 hertz. Let's take a listen. Yeah, very nice. We got rid of the low mids in the muddy boxiness region. It's sounding great. So again, by making these adjustments of our bandwidth to be musical bandwidths in line with octaves, half octaves, and so on, and by boosting tonal frequencies and cutting dissonant frequencies, and it's moves that we were going to make anyway, we've just made slight adjustments. It's simply a more holistic and sympathetic approach to the existing frequencies. So now let's extrapolate these first 3 tips out a little further into tip number 4, which is enhancing fundamental overtones. So we're going to leave our first EQ on, and we're going to bring in a second EQ here, enhancing the harmonic overtones in a musical way. What we're doing here is we're going to do a series of half-octave boosts in the key of C. So all of these nodes on this EQ are set to different Cs that occur throughout the vocal performance. The lowest one down at 128, 251, 523, 1046, and so on. So these are just little half dB boosts that are tuned to the key of C. So you're basically like doing a little EQ tuning job. And this can be a really effective tool. It's very subtle, but it gives a nice, clean, pleasant sound. And that leads us right into tip number 5, which is basically the inverse of this: dampening dissonant octaves. So we'll leave this EQ on, and after that we have another one that is 6 more nodes that are all doing a 1 dB dip in quarter octaves, and these are all dips in the flat fifth of the scale of C major. And what this EQ is going to do is simply discourage the dissonant harmonic overtones that are naturally present. This highest one up here is at 6644, and you can see here that that is right at G sharp A flat. And yes, I love a good flat 5 passing tone as much as anyone else, but this idea applies across the board in all genres. It's simply discouraging dissonance and overtones that are not sympathetic to the key that we're working in. So what we'll do now is we'll play through the vocal again with these 2 EQs turned off, and then we'll turn them both on. This one is discouraging the dissonant frequencies in the flat fifth, and this one is encouraging the tonal fundamentals in the key of C. That little subtle EQ job basically just makes the vocals sound a little bit more in tune. But there you go. I hope you enjoyed that. If you're unfamiliar with those 5 tips, it's just something to keep in mind. You're already making EQ moves anyway, so you might as well keep those principles in your back pocket and pull them out whenever it suits you, because they only encourage an overall more musically appealing EQ job. So thanks for checking that out. I want to say thanks to all my Patreons real quick. I really appreciate you guys. And if you want to support the channel, I highly encourage you to hop on over to Patreon and check out the great content that's over there. It's only $5 a month, and we already have 9 episodes of Q&A up. So There's a lot of great question and answers going on over there, and we get a new one out every week where you get a chance to get your questions answered in detail. And the first Q&A is free for everyone to watch over there so you can get an idea of the content. But thanks again. Let me know what you think in the comments, and I'll catch you all on the next one.